It took me many years in my life to realize that discomfort could be a gift and that it was okay to outgrow a particular version of myself. And I think a lot of times people feel like they can just move on to the next part of their life without grieving their former selves. And we just don't do that.
There's a lot of grief when we are outgrowing our old self, the old identities, the coping mechanisms, the relationships, the versions of ourselves that we had to become in order to survive or be safe.
Moving from something that's familiar, whether it's good for you or not, it's familiar and your brain understands familiarity, to something that's uncomfortable and unfamiliar takes a lot of courage and energy and all those things.
When you start to change, there's going to be people in your life who subconsciously are going to sabotage you because you have an unwritten contract with them that you are going to be like this and they are going to be like this.
When we go through these transitions and these uncomfortable periods, often we lose people around us because they're uncomfortable with the reflection they're seeing in us. They're uncomfortable in facing those truths, and that is why they tend to fall away.
Hello, beautiful souls. It is Sophia from Sacred You. Thank you so much for being here. But before we dive into today's Wisdom Circle, I have a small request from my heart. If our conversations ever resonate with you or support you on your journey, please subscribe to our channel or like this video. It helps us grow Sacred You, welcome more powerful voices into this space, and keep you connected to everything we share. Thank you so much for walking this path with us, and let us begin with today's conversation. We are live for another wonderful Wisdom Circle. I am so excited. Of course, my name is Sophia from Sacred You, and today we have the beautiful Laura Hope with us, who is facilitating the incredible Wisdom Circle. Wonderful conversation. I love this, Laura. Outgrowing who you used to be. Such a wonderful topic, and the gift of getting uncomfortable, which helps us grow, which is something that we all adhere to do, I believe. So, Laura, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us about why you're bringing this wonderful topic to Sacred You in the world. And then we will introduce these wonderful women who are joining you from all around the world.
Yes, thank you, Sophia. And I am so excited to be here, and I just love these discussions. So, yes, today we're going to be talking about outgrowing who you used to be, the gift of getting uncomfortable. And I just love this topic because I think it took me many years in my life to realize that discomfort could be a gift and that it was okay to outgrow a particular version of myself. So, I'm really excited to have this conversation. And I like to have a theme for each of them. And this theme is going to be the liminal space, that place where you're not quite who you used to be and you're not quite the new person. And I think that really fits with us being between seasons. I know where I'm at, it's not quite spring anymore. All of our spring flowers are gone. It's also certainly not summer temperatures yet. So we're in that space. So hopefully this fits. And I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll go around and you guys can introduce each of yourselves. But yeah, I enjoy helping people overcome unwanted behaviors. I have a particular place in my heart for body-focused repetitive behaviors like hair pulling, skin picking, nail biting, but really any behavior that people feel stuck with. That's what I'm really passionate about, helping them outgrow. So that's the work that I do. And again, part of why this topic is so near and dear to my heart. Heather, would you like to go next to introduce yourself and let us know a bit about you?
Sure. My name is Heather Stewart, and Laura and I are close-ish together. I am up in Toronto, Canada, and I love this topic because I help women transition and I help them come back to themselves, because often as women, we get to this place where we've done the job and the career and the kids and everything, and we get to this place where we're like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot about me. And they don't know necessarily how to get back to that. That's the one that's near and dear to my heart because of the transitions I've done myself. I was there, I can help you. And I'm really excited for this topic because I love transition spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Jan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jan Morrison, and in the trimester of my life, as it's been called, or as Jane Fonda says, the third act, about the age of 65, I decided that financial services, and I spent 40 years there, was not going to be the last career. And so I looked for other career choices. And something that also has always fascinated me is human behaviour. And the two linked up beautifully because my passion is seeing women become financially independent. Because I do believe that money, and not money for the sake of money, but money for the sake of having choices in your life, makes an enormous difference. And having come from a background of being a self-supporting mum of three, I became very savvy with money very quickly. And the talk about transitions, money is just a great conduit for growth. It's a great doorway to what's lying underneath, like things of not being worthy, not being deserving. Things aren't available to me. So flipping that is my passion. And I love talking to women about it.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. That's beautiful. Yeah, and money is just energy, right? And it's what do we do with it?
Absolutely.
How do we use it? Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Catherine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I'm Catherine Cristani, and I support women to say yes to themselves because I had to learn to do that and learn to choose myself, exactly like you introduced, Laura, that so often we put our needs to the back end, and as you touched upon, Heather, as well. And sometimes we feel so alone, even though we're in a relationship, because we're not seen, we're not felt, we're not heard. And it's really hard to be excited and joyful living in life when you feel like you're always putting yourself last or your needs don't matter. And exactly what you said about the liminal spaces, the spaces in between, that's exactly where my clients are, right? They're uncomfortable, unknown, and they tempted to go back to where they came from because that was easier or that was more familiar. But when you try and put yourself back in that old box, it doesn't fit anymore. You've definitely outgrown it. So I love this topic and I love the
Mm.
timing of it as well.
Yeah, thank you. So glad to have you here. Yeah, Abby, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Abby Teixeira, and I'm calling in from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I'm a speaker, I'm a published writer and author, trauma recovery coach, and feminine leadership guide, and a ceremonial facilitator as well. I'm also a survivor of complex trauma and have been in recovery from addiction for the past decade, over a decade now, and I'm a mama of beautiful little beings. The work I do in the world is I help cycle breaking women like myself, especially mothers, healers, coaches, and creatives of the global majority. So these are Black, Brown, Indigenous women of color, really rise out of survival mode and really into leading from their truth. So survival in isolation to more embodied truth and their embodied leadership. And I truly believe, and I always say this because this is why I love Sacred You and the Wisdom Talks, that our stories are our medicine, and I believe that our lived experience holds the medicine that the world needs. And having these beautiful conversations is how we get that out there to others who are
Mm.
looking for that. So, yeah, I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so excited to have such a powerhouse of women here. And it sounds like you're all really familiar with that space of this isn't working for me anymore. And how do I get to the next step? So glad to have you guys here.
Mm.
And so I'm going to start with the question about this identity gap, this liminal space. And so I'm curious to know from your perspectives, when you're outgrowing who you used to be, not quite that person and no longer this other person, what does that space feel like? Or what other words or images come to mind for you when you think about being in this liminal space or this gap?
I've got a beautiful metaphor, I think, that works well with clients, and that's when you're mixing two different colours, like a yellow and a blue, and yellow being the new space of who you want to become, the version of who you want to become, and blue being the old version. And in that process, I think a lot of kindness and compassion towards ourselves is essential because moving from something that's familiar, whether it's good for you or not, it's familiar and your brain understands familiarity, to something that's uncomfortable and unfamiliar takes a lot of courage and energy and all those things. So A good way to describe it I've found with clients is when you mix two paints together, you're mixing the yellow and the blue, and then all of a sudden you see little emergence of green, but there's still yellow and there's still some blue. And the green, the more it's mixed and integrated, the more solid the colour of green the new version becomes. And that sort of hits home for people. They get that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And Jan, I think
Mm.
one of the things that I especially love about that metaphor is that I think it illustrates really well how there are plenty of times what we think we need or what we think we want isn't actually what it ends up being. So I love that idea of you take these two parts, and sometimes it might not look like either thing,
Yeah.
what it was or what you thought it was
Yeah.
going to be. Oh, I love that.
True.
Thank you.
True.
Yeah. Abby, do you have any thoughts
Yeah.
on this?
When you were asking what words come to mind when you think about outgrowing yourself, I thought about painful. It's
Yeah.
painful. Like, and the other thing on top of that, that I think it took me a long time to really name what I was feeling as I was evolving and leaving this old identity behind was grief. There's a lot of grief when we are outgrowing our old selves,
Yeah.
right? The old identities, the coping mechanisms, the relationships, the versions of ourselves that we had to become in order to survive or be safe, right? And for a long time, I used to feel a lot of shame around that, right? Like, why am I'm in such a much better place in my life right now? Like, why am I still feeling this sadness towards XYZ, right? And then when I really grounded in with that and really sat with it, I really realized that I was grieving. I was grieving,
Mm.
this
Oh,
identity of myself, even though the current identity is much better, right? And so two truths can exist at once. And I think for me, it was really allowing and giving myself permission to grieve that, right, as it comes.
mm.
And as with grief, and this is something I've been talking a lot about lately, is that grief doesn't have an expiration date. Right. It's like we're in Western society, and culturally we're taught there's a time frame to our grief, whether it's losing like physically losing somebody that we love or changing careers or moving cities or whatever is the grief. That all has grief in it. And there's times when the way I envision it is it hits you in waves, right? And sometimes the grief is gentle waves when I'm like, okay, that's a little bit of sadness here. And sometimes it's like tidal waves where it hits. And it's just learning how to ride those waves as they come along. Because as we are moving and growing and evolving, we are going to have that feeling of grief, because
Yeah.
not every one of ourselves was meant to come with us. And it's okay to be sad about that sometimes.
Yeah. Actually, it's quite honouring, isn't it? To honour that part because that
Yeah.
held you in a safe space for so long. And there's something gracious about grieving that part of you. Yeah. And welcoming the new. Yeah, beautiful. Mm.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. And I love that you said that because I actually have a question about grief a little bit later. So glad that you brought that up, and we're going to circle back around to that idea as well. Yeah, Catherine, would you like to add something?
I so agree with Abby. You do go through the
Mm.
grief, you go through the sadness, but you go through the disappointment as well. And that deep feeling of disappointment in those that were meant to support you and they didn't, or disappointment in yourself because why wasn't I stronger in that moment? And I remember when I was leaving my first marriage, someone said to me, you did the best you could with the information you had.
Mm.
Because it's only when we know better and choose not to do better that we can have that guilt because we are still choosing to stay in this old place. And I almost feel like it is like the five stages of grief because you do get angry and you get frustrated, and it can be lonely too because as you transition to this new space, the old things don't resonate anymore. Things that would have brought you joy before don't. I know for me, I can't watch violent movies at all anymore. I cannot do that. I just find them too triggering, too traumatic. I cannot watch any violence. And there's certain music I can't listen to, all those sorts of things. But then there's certain people I can't talk to because it
Mm.
just feels too shallow. Or I still remember this moment when I was going through my spiritual awakening and I still owned my company. And I walked into the staff area where they were all eating and they were talking about reality TV and whatever it might be. And I went, nope, can't do this. And I just turned around and walked back out. I rather eat alone than put myself in that energy or that conversation. And this is
Mm.
where it can feel really lonely and how you have to learn to put new boundaries because there's a new version of you. And as you're in the in between, it's about having that grace and compassion too to help yourself get to that next step.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that focus on the grace and compassion again. Yeah, I think that I agree. That's so important. Heather, do you have something to add?
Yeah, it's so interesting. We started by saying, what does it feel like, or what is happening when you're in that in between space? And I loved Jan's description of the paint. So if you mix yellow and blue, you're going to get green. If you were aiming for yellow, maybe green was meant all along, but you couldn't see it. But what came into my head was it's can be like a roller coaster when you're changing things, and you can have fun if you're doing it intentionally even in the scary bits. But if it's unintentional, you can just feel like your life has just gone off the rails and it's throwing you up and down. And you might not have a language to explain what it is you're feeling, even. Just think about the human, like the English, whether if English is your first language, language itself is really challenging to describe sometimes what's really happening for us. We have these new ideas coming in, and we might be excited, or we might be unsure, or we might be grieving, and we can go through all of these things. And it can feel, I once talked to a woman about how the butterflies are formed, like the monarch butterfly. When it's in the cocoon, apparently it's quite a mess. It's very messy and looks nothing like a caterpillar and nothing like a butterfly. And if you interrupt the process, nothing comes out right. So is it easier to stay this a caterpillar and not go through the messy part? And like Catherine was saying, if you decide to do that, then that's your decision. But if you know what's on the other, I actually just was talking about this yesterday. If you know on the other side of that messy part, it's going to be really good, and you can trust that, then it can sometimes make that transition space a little easier to manage. And I know sometimes we have trouble with that trust section of that it's going to be okay. And I talk a lot about impermanence. Even the messy parts are impermanent. It's okay. We can get through it. But it's so interesting that we have trouble putting language around it. And I think one of the ways that we can support people is helping them be in that space, even if they can't explain it.
Yeah, I love that. Even if they can't explain it, right? Because you're right, a lot of times they don't have the language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that comes to mind for me about this space, and I have just this image in my mind from my own experience when years ago I was working with a therapist, and he helped me see that I wasn't as happy as I was claiming to be, really helped peel that back. And I remember in that moment, I felt like I had done such a good job of sweeping the dirt under the rug, and I felt like he took my rug away. And I was so angry at first because I was like, I'm not ready to see this mess. I don't want to clean up this mess. I just want just give me my rug back so I can go back, right? But of course you can't, right? There are things that once you see them, you can't unsee them. And so that's in my mind, the picture of that liminal space is your rug is gone, but you're not quite ready to clean up the mess yet, or maybe you're just getting started and kind of sitting with that yuck for a bit while you figure out, okay, what are my next steps? And when am I going to be ready to take those steps? Because I remember another thing that a friend said to me that was incredibly helpful during that time was she said, you're not ready yet, and that's okay. And I remember feeling such a relief of, oh, I don't have to do anything about it yet. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I know, Abby, you brought up grief, right? And then others had mentioned it, right? So I'm so glad that you brought it up because I think it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. And I think a lot of times people feel like they can just move on to the next part of their life without grieving their former selves. And we just don't do that, right? We really do need to process that before we can truly move on. So I'm curious to know, how do you grieve that time? What strategies do you have? Or for a client who might say, okay, I get that I need to grieve, but like, how in the world do I do that? What would you suggest?
I love that Jan brought up self-compassion because that's something that I had to really learn, that the survival versions of myself still deserved compassion, right? Rather than shaming and blaming, right? Sometimes when you start to become aware of the ways in which we survived. Like, for example, for myself, people pleasing, right? Or hyper independent, or the ways that I used to cope through numbing or shrinking myself. These were all adaptations that I developed very intelligently as a child so that I could survive the very unsafe environment that I was around, right? And so without any guidance, I didn't have anybody guiding me. This is what you should do. This is what could help. This is how to process this traumatic experience. None of that, right? And so we adapt to our environment, and for myself, I unfortunately picked up some really unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so there was a period in my healing journey when I used to look back to that version of myself with cringe. I'd look back and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I did that, or I was like that, or I can't believe I fawned that way, or that kind of a thing. And the more I would beat myself up in that way, the more depressed and not hopeful and all of that kind of stuff I would become. But when I started to really learn and understand the reasons why I developed those adaptations or coping skills or mechanisms, was because I needed to survive, and allowing myself to grieve that I no longer need to be in that place anymore. And I had this really powerful conversation the other day with a friend of mine, a really dear friend of mine, and we were just talking about capacity and the ways in which we show up in the world. And for myself, for example, I'm a mom of four, I have my own business, I still work as a nurse part-time, I have my husband and all the things, and I'm still on my healing journey. And we were just talking about how I always get the question, oh wow, I can't believe you're like a superwoman. You can do all these things and all of these kind of things. And society really does cheer you on when you are like super busy and super just doing overproducing kind of thing, right? And something that she had said to me was that, because I talked about how I've been able to develop that capacity, right? And a lot of it has been through survival, right? And she had said to me, just because you have this incredible, massive capacity, you've grown this capacity, doesn't mean that you need to anymore. And I was like, phew, it was just like this. My shoulders dropped, and I was like, you're absolutely right. And so, similarly, when I look back and I think about the previous versions of myself, just because I needed to survive in those times, and those are the things that I did, I no longer need to, right? And so now I really gently approach her, little me, and with love, loving kindness and compassion, and give her the things that I wish I would have had on those times. But now I'm able and capable to give her those things, right? And yeah, it's a really beautiful and messy process.
Yeah, I love that. I love the compassion. I love the connecting with little you. I love the idea of just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Does anybody else have thoughts on, yeah, Catherine?
I actually tell my clients, and I did this myself, write a letter to the dreams that never happened and actually let them
Mm,
go that way. Because, for example, if you're in a relationship and you're choosing to step out of it because it's no longer working for you, my favorite example is on your wedding day, you don't sit there and go, I do, and then think about divorcing that person 5 years later, right? So, it's like mourning those dreams of what potential it did have and then it didn't happen. And like you brought up earlier, Laura, it's because there's something bigger going on, right? There's more things happening than we can even understand. But we still need to allow that grieving process to happen and allow it to come forward. And I know when I left my first marriage, my naturopath said to me, he goes, for 5 years, you're going to still be triggered. I said, what are you talking about? He's 5 years. I promise you, 5 years, you're going to still keep being triggered by all
mm,
these things. And I was like, no. And then I sold the house that I built with my ex. And all these grief and all these emotions came up because it was almost, we'd still been apart for quite a long time. I'd gotten remarried, had a new child, all these sorts of things. But at the same time, a lot of the things we don't realize are holding that energy because that was the house we built together that we were going to have family with. But when I sold that, that dream finally fully died. So sometimes it come in stages and it can come in waves. And again, that compassion just keeps coming back. But allow
Yeah.
yourself to sit in the emotion too,
Mm.
because we're so often quick to push it down or push it away. Be angry, be frustrated, be sad, be disappointed, feel the shame, feel the confusion, whatever it is, because the more we suppress that and push it down, the more it's going to show up in other aspects of our life too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, such an important aspect of it to feel the emotions, right? Because so often, yeah, we just want to jump to healing or jump to the next step without feeling the emotions. And we just carry them around until in our body until we are ready to unpack them.
And also
Yeah.
jump into the doing because
Yeah.
society, basically, if we go back to Heather's example of the chrysalis, there's a lot, even though it doesn't look like a lot's going on in a chrysalis. That's where all the transformation is actually going on in a chrysalis. So, if I liken that to our own transformation, we are so can be hooked into, continue doing the doing. And as Catherine said, not to suppress that, whatever the feeling is, to actually acknowledge it. I'd love to share something with you that happened just recently. And I woke up one morning, and I felt totally inadequate. And I went, oh my goodness, you're 75 years of age, Jan. You've been adequate for a long time. So just went through a fun exercise, and the exercise is to acknowledge it. Oh, hi, inadequacy. Gave it a name and just said, okay, we're having a conversation now. These are all the areas that I'm adequate in. So thanks for playing a visit. Obviously, there's a little remnant there from wherever. I recognize you, I acknowledge you, and now I release you and set you free. And the minute I did that, it changed. My physiology changed. It was fabulous. Yeah. So not to suppress, because each time an emotion is suppressed, it'll just come back louder, bigger, brighter. So we need to acknowledge things as they come up, I've found.
Definitely so important. Yeah. And I think of it as the universe is so kind to us that if we don't get the message from it the first time, it will keep presenting it to us again and again.
Until
and
you
we
get
can
it.
think of, yeah, exactly. And we can think of that as, oh my gosh, I'm triggered again, or oh my gosh, it's happening again. Or we can think of it as, oh, look how kind the universe is. I missed the message the first time. Now it's giving me another opportunity to receive this message. Okay, let's give it a go. And then you can't mess it up, because if you don't receive the message, it'll be presented to you again until you do.
Yeah.
And Heather, do you have any thoughts on how to grieve?
It's interesting because I'm thinking of you and your rug. We know that suppression is bad, and we know that it's going to keep coming up, and it's going to keep coming up. And I think, like Abby was saying, Abby has a lot of capacity. Abby, I was reading your Substack articles. There's sometimes that capacity, and you filling that capacity is you avoiding cleaning up what you have shoving under your carpet, right? And at the same time, sometimes we take on this role of, I'm going to sit down and face this and do it, as another thing for our to-do list. So then it's not really processing. It becomes like a task that we've labored ourselves with. And Catherine touched on it and Jan touched on it. I think even Abby touched on it. So no matter how you choose to sit with it, and there's going to be times when it's uncomfortable, and there's going to be times when that discomfort is not something that you can manage at that point. So then I think it's okay to go and do something else. It's not like you're stuffing it down by not facing it in every single moment. And even when you do deal with it, Catherine's 5 years later, I think it's not even necessarily that grief or that pain comes up in the same way. It's like, you have dealt with this layer of how to deal with this. Let's try a new layer. Let's try this perspective, or let's try this perspective. So it's almost like it keeps challenging you that little bit and little bit, so you can keep growing and growing. And Jan is obviously super practiced. She goes, okay, no, we're not playing this game. And she could clear it, where some people who aren't that far in their processes or their learnings they might not have got I'm inadequate, like kaboom. They might have just got a little bit of self-doubt, and teaching them to build those muscles. Sure. So I think that finding this way and being kind to yourself, wherever you are, right? Just being kind to yourself. And is this something I can do something with right now? Do I need help? Is always a question, right? And then what can I do right now? What can I do right now? And be in love with that you can do something.
Yeah, I love that there's such a nice emphasis on compassion and self-love and being kind to yourself, because I think that can often be overlooked. And a lot of times once we're in this in-between space, we realize that the past version of ourselves, we judge it as bad, right? That's who I was, that's bad. I need to move on from that. And I think that can get in the way of us being compassionate with that version of ourselves that honestly was just trying to protect us all along, right? It's not like it was trying to be quote unquote bad or acting up or misbehaving. It was really just trying to protect us all along. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm curious to know if you could write a letter to that version of yourself in between a change. If you think about a transition that you've been through, and of course, there's that messy middle, right? If you could, with the wisdom that you have now, write a letter or send a message to that in between version of you, what would you say? What would you include? What's important for you to know when you're in that messy middle?
I feel like it's okay to not know where you're going, if that makes
Mm.
sense. And I can think of maybe Catherine and I have had similar lives. I can think of it. I've been divorced twice, and I didn't intend to divorce either of these people. But when you're in the middle of this part that's really uncomfortable and relationships are ending and ways of being are changing, and if someone had said to me at that time, because this was before coaching and this kind of thing was so mainstream and sharing was so mainstream, it was like if someone had said to me at that time, a lot of things are going to change and it's okay. You're allowed to be upset about it, but also know that, similar to what I said earlier, also know that the change is going to be better than you expected. You may have had a plan in making, if you created the change, or you may have a plan of how you're going to recover from something, but leave room for it to be even better than you could have imagined. And just trust, like each day is going to be a little bit better. Sometimes you might have a little stumble, but just keep going and it's going to be great.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Yeah, I hear trust, and it's okay to not be okay. Yeah, and I think those are huge pieces of that process. Yeah.
Mm.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Catherine?
Surrender. Just
Mm,
because I'm so guilty of
I
trying to
feel that.
control outcomes. And just surrendering and having, again, that self-compassion, but also do things for yourself in those moments too. When everything feels sad and you're feeling angry or you're not sure where you are, just coming back and doing something for yourself that brings you joy. And it can be as simple as putting on your favorite song or some uplifting music or watch your favorite movie with a bowl of popcorn. Just, it doesn't have to be big. It can just be something you do that's small, that allows you to feel like you and feel like a little bit stable. Because one of my soul lessons is trust. And let me tell you, the universe really likes to leave me hanging till the final deadline. The, hey, universe, I need money for this, and they'll give it to me on the 11th hour kind of thing. This is very much having that compassion and exactly like Heather said, you don't know what's coming, right? It's just it can be bigger. And I think we've all touched upon that. We're so limited in what we think is possible for us, whereas the universe has a way bigger plan. And usually, when you can surrender and just allow yourself to be in the moment and be present, that is when you can have that really powerful expansion. And it doesn't feel so messy. It doesn't feel so harsh because you're just surrendering and allowing it to happen rather than pushing against it.
Thank you. I love that. Yeah,
Mm.
surrender and nourish yourself, right? Yeah. And so much of our pain comes from resisting what is, right? We think that our circumstances are painful or that's what causes our suffering. And I think so often we miss that it's the resistance that causes our pain and suffering, not the situation, not our
Mm.
emotions. Yeah. And so
Yes,
surrendering and being like, it's okay to be whatever it is right now is so powerful.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Jan, do you have anything to
Um,
add?
I think I'd say to my younger self that I'm exactly where I need to be. And to follow on from Catherine, trusting that the process, we're works in process, to have that understanding, and also trusting that we are works in process, and rather than progress, because I know we refer to both, but it is a process and it's all going to happen exactly the way it's meant to happen. So in the interim, self-love, self-compassion, say the things that you want to hear, that Nobody else is saying them. Say them to yourself. And self-love.
Yeah, that's so big. Yeah, and such a valuable part of the process, and unfortunately something that many people don't get taught growing up, but still so valuable. Yeah, thank you. Abby, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to, I think it was Catherine that alluded to the feelings of being feeling lonely in this process sometimes, right? Because once again, when we were talking about grief, one of the things that I know for myself, I really had to grieve was relationships, right? Certain people that I outgrew and dynamics and conversations, environments. Similar to Catherine, I just could no longer do surface level small talk about the weather, set a time like to go for lunch and just do that with someone anymore. It just was not aligned in my values anymore. And I think for me, when I started really realizing that certain people started to become uncomfortable when I stopped shape-shifting to make them feel comfortable, right? And AKA when I stopped abandoning myself. And so for me, it had to be about acceptance that some of these relationships just could no longer continue in the way that they had been operating up until this point. And that it didn't mean that I don't love them anymore or that I dislike them. It's just, it is what it is, right? I was going down this direction, they were staying behind, or they were going in a completely different direction, and then accepting that's part of the process. And then allowing for the grief around that, honoring that grief around there, and then just holding true that there are going to be others, because that's been the gift and the joy of that process, is that in their place have been other incredible relationships that see me who I actually am as I am today and are with me. We are going in similar directions. We uplift each other. The conversations are rich and deep and beautiful. So just that piece of that loneliness piece, if I could go back and I could talk to my younger self, I would acknowledge and forewarn her that not everyone is going to come along, right? And I think that I had some really heartbreaking lessons early in my recovery journey where I expected certain relationships to pan out in a certain way. And when that expectation didn't match the reality, it was devastating for me. Right. And so if I could just go back, I would hug her and hold her and be like, listen, not everyone's going to come with you on this journey, and we have to be okay with it. And I can promise you that on the other side, there's going to be so much more. You're going to be enriched in your life in ways that you couldn't even imagine with the new relationships that are going to come in its place. And yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Abby. And it's so funny. That is the absolute perfect lead up to my final question, which is about relationships and people pleasing. And I find that this is one of the most challenging things that clients encounter is when they start to change, they realize that some people in their lives really prefer the old version of them and don't really want the new version of them. They don't want to change up that dance. They lose too much of what they were getting to really support the other person in growth. So, how do you handle that situation when, and again, Abby, I love it. It's just led up so perfectly. How do we handle that situation when we realize that other people are not coming on this journey with us, that they needed something from us that they could only get from that old version of us?
I guess I can touch on it just because it's fresh in my mind from what we just talked about. But I think for me, it was about normalizing it through having these types of conversations with other people who were in similar scenarios as me, right? Because if I isolated and then I started getting in my own head, like maybe I'm being too harsh, maybe I shouldn't have put this boundary up, like maybe all the justifications and excuses that we sometimes can make when we make these difficult decisions or we put up boundaries or we make changes in relationships, because you do get pushback, right? And for me, I wasn't prepared for that pushback. And what really helped me was being in communities, being in circles where I talked about this struggle that I was having. And others would pipe up and they would talk and they would be like, yeah, me too. I've had to do that too. I've had to grieve that. And this is how the backlash I received. And so then it normalized the struggle. And then I didn't feel so alone in it. And then it actually solidified and helped validate my decisions, especially when it came to really important big decisions. Like, for example, for myself, several years ago, I chose to go no contact with my dad. And that was an incredibly painful decision that I had to make that came after decades of trying to make a relationship, salvage our relationship. And it was just doing more harm than good. And when I made that decision, it changed the dynamics of my family, ultimately, of my family of origin. And so I had a lot of second guessing, a lot of just going back and forth with myself about this decision. And when I found support circles, if you will, where there were other people who are navigating these similar scenarios, it was just so validating. It helped me strengthen my resolve. And then I was able to then walk along in my path, even though, and still honoring that it is still painful. And like I mentioned early on, I'm still learning to ride the waves of grief because they do come. But again, I'm not doing it by myself. And when those waves of grief come and they're the tidal wave kind of grief, I know where to turn to and who to turn to. And I can share with certain people in my life now. Today was a really rough day. I had this trigger come up around my dad or whoever is the case, right? And they listen and they validate and they understand rather than trying to push back and add fuel to the fire. Or so I know who to go to with these kind of things that can support me in my decision and really help me to stay strong in some of these decisions. And so that has been massive help for me, just not navigating it by myself and having the people that I can safely share these struggles with.
Yeah, that's a way to knowing who to go to, because there are some people where we just need to be sad and some people where we need to be a cheerleader, right? And so making sure that you're matching your resource with what you need. Yeah, absolutely. Catherine.
Family is the hardest, right? I feel friendships you can accept and move forward, but when it comes to your family, that can be the most triggering, and them learning to adapt to the new version of you can be hard for them as well. And I know for me, I was not spoken to by a chunk of my family, like my brother, and I wasn't even invited to my brother's wedding to that extent. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm holding my ground. I'm apparently in the wrong, but I haven't done anything. And then weirdly, my grandfather passed away, and all of a sudden, all these relationships shifted. And I actually think he was working on the other side, because it was like we walked into this event and we walked back out. And I looked at my husband, I said, did we jump timelines? I don't understand what happened here, because we just kept holding ourselves in the moment and kept doing the work for ourselves. And if they're meant to come back to you by changing who you are in that moment and choosing to honor you, they'll come back with a better relationship. They'll come back on your terms, not on the expectations they always put on you. So I find families the hardest. But it was interesting, when I left my first marriage, I lost most of my friends, and it took me years to figure out why. And then I joke and say they were allergic to divorce. But at the same time, what it was doing was reflecting back to them the insecurities in their relationships. And when we go through these transitions and these uncomfortable periods, often we lose people around us because they're uncomfortable with the reflection they're seeing in us. They're uncomfortable in facing those truths. And that is why they tend to fall away. Or it can be the case, like with my staff, like I mentioned earlier, I just don't resonate with that conversation anymore. I don't want to be in that energy. I don't want to lower myself to be in that. And it's not lowering my standards or anything. It's just, I don't want to have that conversation. And so when you are a people pleaser and I was guilty of trying to fix everybody and everything. That was definitely me. But when you choose to stop doing that, people need a moment to catch up, and they'll either fall away or they'll stay. And my favorite saying is, people come into your life for a reason, a season, a cycle, or a lifetime. And when I was leaving my company and I had all my staff leaving in threes, because the universe likes to give me messages in threes. But at the same time, by the time I got to the last set of three, there was 3 rounds of three, right? By the time I got to the final round, remember saying, these people aren't meant to be in my life anymore, and I'm not meant to be doing this anymore. I accept that and thank you. But it, like you said, Laura, it's like the universe will keep repeating the lesson till you get there. But at the same time, this is where you realizing sometimes those people are meant to fall away, and if they're meant to come back, they will. It's like that whole expression, you set a bird free, and if they fly, let them go. If they're going to come back, they will. And it's the exact same thing. Sometimes we need to do that for ourselves and set ourselves free. And if people are meant to fly with us, then they will.
Oh, I love that idea of setting
Absolutely.
ourselves free. Yes. And if there's something that, whatever it is, whatever we're letting go of, we can come back to it later if we decide that we really needed it. Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, Heather.
It's a funny thought popped into my head when we were talking about this, because this was like almost 30 years ago. So it was way before I had started to do all of this work on myself. And I was going to this place it was like a Weight Watchers. to lose weight. And we had group meetings. And one lady said, the leader of the group said at one point, she said, when you start to change, meaning lose weight, there's going to be people in your life who subconsciously are going to sabotage you because you have an unwritten contract with them that you are going to be like this and they are going to be like this. And if everything stays the same, then nobody has to look at what's going on and what's working and what's not working. So even something small like that, like Catherine was saying, people needed time. They've got this unwritten agreement of you will be like this and I will be like this. And when you start to change it, it's disruptive for people. And some people are a little more resilient and can bounce back a little bit faster. And some people don't bounce back at all. And if you can't be that way for them to hold whatever that way was for them, they actually can't make that change, or they could, technically they could, but they are unwilling to make that change. And that release of those people is hard. And Catherine, you're right, family is a killer. And Abby, because they know you so well and they know you to be a certain way that if you really start to change that, that changes think of the web of a family dynamic. That changes that structure so at its core that could be too much for a lot of people, to figure out how to make that change. And if we could flip dimensions, that'd be amazing. Let's go to the next. Let's go up to the fifth dimension, 6. I'll even take 7. But when I talk to clients, sometimes I talk to them, I'm like, you're building your own village. If you're going to make big changes, you are creating a village for yourself. And who is in your village? Abby's got these great circles, and you will attract the right people into your village if you can hold that intention, that vibration of this is the energy that I want in my life now. And it's almost like it will shield you from the other ones coming into your village. Family, I don't know. You might have to get someone at the gates.
It's always the gates.
Yes, thank you, Heather. And yeah, I love that you call it in that energy piece of it, right? The universe just reflects back whatever energy we are. And so if we embody that, then yes, it does shield us from those other energies that aren't a good fit for us at that time. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, thank you. Jan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can remember making the first decision when I made the decision to leave my first husband. And the people at the family, speaking of families, the family that rocked up and seemingly to give me some advice, to share. Often it was for hours and hours of them talking about what was not right about their relationship. So totally concur with everybody. Everybody in our life is a mirror for us to get a better understanding of who we are, to help us on our soul journey, I believe. And family are the most dynamic mirrors for us. That's why we're in the family, because they are the ones that are going to show us by triggering us what we actually need to attend to be able to go to the next level, whatever, however you want to describe that. And I think when you were earlier talking about dancing, it's once again a great analogy. You've decided you've been waltzing with people for a while, and all of a sudden you discover this dance. It's called the tango, and you go, wow, I really like that. And you start doing the tango and say to your partner, come and do the tango with me. And they go, no, I just want to waltz. But I want to do the tango. So it's in that decision. And there's a couple of things. Women have been socialized, trained to be we take care of everybody else and we put ourselves last. So that's, for me, I believe that's one of the biggest lessons to learn, is that we need to put ourselves first, center of our world. And in sitting in that empowered state, we can through ripple effect in a positive way everybody around us. And people, families, friends will change, and there'll be others that won't change. And to accept that, it's just the way it is. Setting clear boundaries, I think, is important. The word no is a complete sentence, and that's cool and that's fine. to be able to do that. You have the right to do that. And making the distinction, I think, between getting to the edge of growth, and sometimes I know I've done it in the past, push through something that I actually wasn't ready to push through. So there's two opportunities: one to get to the edge and grow some more, and another one is actually a warning. And the words I've identified for me is when there's any ought, shouldn't, have to, that's a warning to not go ahead with that. So trusting our intuition. The most valuable, I think, they're having people around. For me now, the most valuable thing is to commune with higher self, and I have a strategy to do that, and I trust that implicitly. The answer will come, and I leave it go until it comes. So the human experience, I think, is just beautiful. And I think as souls, I think it's wonderful that we keep wanting to come back here to experience that physical experience, the tough times and the joyous times, the light, the dark. Yeah.
Thank you. And I love how you talked about just being in alignment with yourself. If we just focus on being in alignment with ourselves, or as Byron Katie talks about, staying in our own business, right? So often we're in other people's business. If we could just stay in our own business, then everything else will fall into place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think one piece of wisdom or advice that I think is really valuable when we're looking at these relationships and letting them shift, and I always talk to clients about warning them that the other person will be confused. And that's okay. They're allowed to be confused. If we are the one changing and growing, we are the one switching it up on them. And so they have every right to be confused.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we're doing the wrong thing in changing or growing, right? They can be confused and we can be doing the right thing. But I think so often we interpret their confusion as I'm doing something wrong, right? They're confused, they're intensifying, they're pushing back, so I must be doing something wrong. I just need to get back into my place, right? And I think when we can, one, expect that other people are going to be confused, and B, allow them to be confused and do with what they will, then it's an easier process, right? Then we're not trying to push back to that acceptance, right? And staying in our business.
And not
Yeah.
trying to make it right for them and fix it for them. Let them sit in their discomfort and us sit in our discomfort. And there is the gift in the discomfort. We grow and they
Yes.
have got the potential of growing as well.
Exactly. Because that discomfort for them is just a message from the universe that they haven't received yet in another situation, right? And yes, that is a gift for them. It's a gift for all of us. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not ours to own whether they receive that gift in that moment or not. That's not ours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. I so very much appreciate this conversation. And I think that this has been such a lovely talk with such amazing wisdom. And I can tell that you guys have really been through your own journeys, right? And that you approach coaching from a place of really understanding it because you've been through these transitions, and you have this broader perspective, this wider lens of what the process, what the change looks like. And so I just want to say thank you for everybody. Thank you to everybody for your input and your wisdom.
Thank you, Laura. It was beautifully facilitated.
I'm so glad.
Wonderful.
And
Thank you.
to all
And
participants,
so thank you very,
lovely
very
meeting
much
you.
for bringing your wisdom circle back to Sacred You. Looking forward to the next time. And there's a wonderful conversation for anyone who is listening live or on the replay. Do click on the links and reach out to these amazing women who have just given up an hour of their time to share their wisdom, their experience, lived experience on what it's like to really outgrow who we used to be, and going through all that stuff that makes us uncomfortable but makes us grow so much. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Heather, Catherine, Jan, and Abby again for joining us on this Wisdom Circle. We will be back then sometime very soon with more Wisdom Circles. Click on the links below and check them out. sacredyou.love. Check out everything that we've got coming up. Come and join us for more Wisdom Circles. And like I said, reach out to these amazing women. And wherever you are, have a beautiful day or evening if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. And we will see you next time. Thank you ever so much.